Take a look at these 3D printed guitar picks. What's the main difference between all of them? I will admit that is sort of a trick question. Beyond the dirtiness and the wear, you may not be able to tell without being the one who actually made them. The main difference is what they were printed on and how they were generated. This pick was printed on the Ender 3 V3 SE, and this one was printed on the Bambu Labs P1P. And this one, made on the P1P, is defected and broke within a month of its creation, if not sooner. Now let's talk about this one. This one was printed on the Ender 3 V2, not a Neo, just a base V2. The only things that were changed on the printer are some parts that needed to be upgraded because they were breaking, and a BL Touch with some community-made firmware to make it actually useful. This Ender 3 V2 pick is clearly not right, but unlike the one made on the P1P, this one is just worn down from actual use. This is normal for a guitar pick. This one had to have been printed at least a year ago, if not longer, and it has been used and abused since its creation. It's probably had at least a week's time in total time actually being used, and it's still going strong and is functional. So why is the Ender 3 V2 pick so much stronger than the P1P pick? Well, in reality, the machines are irrelevant. The problem comes down to the step before the machines, the slicers. I have the pick model imported into both Creality Slicer, which is more like Kira if not a clone built from it, and I have it imported into Bambu Studio, which is a clone from Prusa Slicer and is the base for Orca Slicer. This will allow us to see the fundamental difference and highlight the issues. Let's start with Creality Slicer. I slice the model, and as we look through the layers, pay attention. It doesn't really need to be very close attention since the problems will be obvious in the next example, but take note of what you see here. Now onto Bambu Studio. I slice the model, and on the surface nothing is wrong. But if we go even just one layer deep, we already have a problem. The lines are broken by whatever this is. Honestly, I can't even tell you what this is or why it's there. Whatever this function is, it creates an arbitrary wall under my number extrusion here. Which brings us to our next layer. Once again, this print's integrity is flawed by the algorithm of these slicers. Now I know the cause of this one and why it's there. This is typically generated as a sort of support layer to ensure a secure place and platform for the next layers to print over a gap. This was a Prusa slicer feature, and typically is useful for making your prints come out cleaner, and to the best of my knowledge, this always gets generated, whether you want it or not. At least I don't know how to turn it off if there is a way. But clearly in this instance, it is an unneeded burden on this model and hinders its functionality significantly. And it does so in both instances of whatever advanced slicing is happening. And as I said before, I don't think there's a way to turn any of this off. It's all been hard-coded into the program from the parent slicer, Prusa Slicer. But again, this is just from my somewhat intermediate knowledge of Bambu Slicer. What really helped me even finally have an idea of what's even going on here was a couple lines said in Maker's Muse's video about improving durability and weight of TPU in 3D prints.
10% is very, very low, but Prusa Slicer does some really clever stuff where it adds internal bridging to support geometry that forms over areas that don't have infill. So don't worry about having to have infill so high that supports areas that form in the print, because Prusa Slicer does some clever stuff to bridge and support those areas anyway.
This helped me finally realize that this wasn't because of something I was doing wrong. This is just advanced BS coded in the programs. These interruptions in the flow of the print are insanely detrimental to the longevity of the print, as I have already shown. But why is this? Well, if you have any experience with tools, especially making ones with wooden handles, then you already probably understand. When using a hammer, axe, or even bigger tools like a hoe or shovel. Okay, so I have to re-record the whole rest of the video for the 4th time because my my audio interface has been having audio errors. It was weird, but here we go. When you're using a hammer, axe, or even bigger tools like a hoe or shovel, all with wooden handles, they all should have at least one thing in common. The wood grain of the handle should follow the primary direction of the use of the tool. An axe handle's grain follows the direction of the blade. A hammer's handle grain follows the head and the claw action, and a shovel's handle grain follows the lifting action. Now think of the 3D printer layers, the way it lays them down, and all of that. That is the wood grain. If you interrupt the grain, its strength is significantly reduced at the separation. So let's say you made your handle too short when forging or crafting your tool. To compensate and add length, you use wood glue or some other average carpenter/craftsman adhesive to join an additional length of handle and even additionally add tape over it. This is effectively the same thing as what's happening on my pick designs created by the P1P. The failure point more often than not will be the glued section of the handle before anything else. The glued section represents the interrupted flow of the plastic, and the tape represents the top and bottom layers in this instance. And it may hold it all together for a length of time, but the handle is still in two pieces, and as time and use persists, the inside is going to keep shifting further out of place, and is going to wear down the tape and outer walls, resulting in deformation and eventually breakage. In both cases, even the deformation stage seriously affects the use. A separation in the middle of a tool handle will make the tool more floppy and overall less effective. And essentially the same principle goes for the guitar picks as well. Now all this is truly an issue, because unlike most other printers, I am stuck using either Bambu Studio or Orca Slicer when using the P1P. Many people know this, but Bambu Labs wanted to lock down as much as possible when it came to their machines and products, most likely for troubleshooting reasons, for support and stuff like that, and possibly to prevent reduced knockoff or alternative purchases of replacement or alternate parts needed in the future. So that has made me wondering, why don't I just keep printing on one of the Ender 3s? Well, I tried for a day or two adjusting slicer settings for the V2, and there was always a quality issue somewhere on the pick. If I fixed one area, a new issue would always happen in a different place. And I have many videos about showing my struggles with the V3, so I will let those speak for themselves. Then some people who aren't paying attention might ask, why don't you use Orca Slicer to perfect the slicing with all the tests and flow rate and such? And the answer is obvious for people who are paying attention. Orca Slicer was based on Bambu Slicer, so that it could be open sourcely developed and changed, but also still be functional with the Bambu Labs machines, since the functionality was already implemented in the source program. But because of this, Orca Slicer will still have the same fatal flaws. I even tried going on the Orca Slicer subreddit and asking if anyone knew of a way to remove these extra extrusions, or if there was an alternate or add-on version that could do so. And like many of my questions, they went unanswered without any attempt. And this is all a problem because I would like to be able to sell these one day, and the small but persistent issues will probably not fly with at least 80% of the market if I were to guess, and that's if my product even reaches 100% of the market, which is highly unlikely, especially in a low price, high competition area like guitar picks. That being said, I request that you don't take my design or my ideas in this area. I know that might be a big ask for a small amount of people and probably irrelevant for a majority, but I'm still putting it out there. I will also now mention that I think that there is another smaller brand that makes a similar shape, but I was unaware of them at the time of designing, and this is only a vague recollection from maybe like a single listing that I might have found on Amazon. This is a fuzzy but necessary addition. Also, if you're interested in 3D printing guitar picks or other guitar-related items, I will be making a video about that subject in the near future, so subscribe for that. Now, when I contacted Bambu Labs support about this issue a little more than a year ago now, they gave me a few unsatisfying answers that I will now quote. The first time that they referred to the extrusion anomalies, though I think they specifically meant the extrusion under the number, they said, "What's happening here is that Kira, spelled K-I-R-A, even though we are communicating through text, and I spelled it correctly the first time, Kira is less accurate than our slicer, so anything that it can't understand, it basically just discards. Our slicer will actually replicate the thing's faults and all." I have two problems looking back on this reply. First of all, I designed this model originally in FreeCAD, with specific dimensions made for 3D printing at 0.2 layer heights, so there should be no faults in the model even if it really worked that way. Next is something that was just a thing that partially whiffed over my head at the time. They followed that quote with saying that they scaled up the model's thickness by 0.2 millimeters, which is already a no-no for guitar picks, and then they said it removed the issue. First of all, they are having a fundamental misunderstanding of the problem. I think the only issue fixed was a really strange one. The two anomalies that we see on the 3-pick were combining because I was using a thinner 2-pick as my example in the email. So the anomalies were then separated because the model was thicker, like shown in the 3 guitar pick model shown, but that's because it had then become the same thickness as the 3-pick. The numbers relate to the thickness. So my reply was this. Unfortunately, changing the thickness defeats the purpose of the model. So here's my next question. Why is this separation happening on layer 2? Why is the inset design causing what looks like an inner wall to be created on the next layer? I noticed it occurred in your slightly thicker design and in my thicker models of this guitar pick. I designed it to be only 0.20 millimeters deep so that it wouldn't interfere with the next layers. So I was referring to the bridging that happens over the inset logo on the pick. This logo cannot be removed, and this is unfortunately the only way to have my logo on the pick reasonably. I explored many options, but there are basically none for getting this task done without spending a lot of money, a lot of time, it's completely unreasonable for any other method that I have found so far. So if this method worked properly, it would be the only way. But in my current position, there is no way. As mentioned before, I would like to sell these as a product one day, but without the logo, there is no branding, and I don't want to make the picks different colors depending on the thickness, so that's why there's the numbers. So I can't in good and logical conscience replace the number with the logo, otherwise even for personal use, having multiple different thicknesses of picks would be annoying and a detractor as a product commercially. It's not impossible to tell the difference of guitar pick thicknesses purely by feel, but people would probably rather use what they can easily identify. All the little details are important when making a product and battling the competition. And the main point of this video is that it shouldn't have been an issue in the first place. So what the Bambu Labs representative had to say to my reply was this. The reason is that it is trying to accurately replicate the inset design within the parameters it's given. As mentioned, our slicer is far more precise than Cura, spelled correctly this time. Using a less complex model might provide a better result, or as mentioned, you can use a 0.2 nozzle and it will work just fine. So the first thing to get out of the way is that they mentioned the 0.2 nozzle in an earlier message that wasn't shown in the video, but even though he says it works fine, the program still creates these intruding additions just in finer detail. Then there's the accurate replication BS and that the model is too complex. Part of what this probably came down to was miscommunication on my part, but I didn't know how to accurately interpret what I wanted at the time. But there was also room for the other guy to try and work with me a little more and properly understand me and my problem. From what I can tell looking back, I think the rep kept thinking that I was wanting the logo on the first layer to turn out better and in finer detail, when that had nothing to do with what I was actually asking. And he partially addressed what I actually wanted sometimes, but then made excuses, making it seem like it was my fault as a designer, and if I made the model with better tolerances or something like that, it would work right, when that is of course fundamentally wrong and not true. And what really annoys me is that over a year later, I know that there is nothing I can do to fix my problem. The only thing I can do is learn some advanced coding to change how the slicer fundamentally works. I might be in the minority here, but I don't think that that should be my responsibility, especially when I, as a person, am already trying to learn so many other subjects. So really this issue comes down to their developers, who will probably never address this issue, or at least not by the time it's relevant for me anymore. Well, that is unless other users also make a stink about this too, but that is also unlikely. However, I am also not even done yet. I had another strange slicer anomaly recently. When I was working on a video about experimenting with TPU, I was working on a model that was meant to function like a rubber stamp. I made the model so that the stamp face was the base and it had some walls that extruded outward by 45 degrees to prevent drooping or supports being needed around the functional area. Now granted, the anomaly occurred on an unfinished version of the model that I accidentally exported, but it still could have been usable, and it could have been the final model that I printed and used if I wanted to. It happened because there was some little holes on the top of the model due to the way the stamp's design extruded in 3D designing. Now because of how the extrusion worked, there were some areas that were considered as holes near and underneath the top layers, and thus created some unnecessary bridging circles above them on the top layers. This then created this same unnecessary interruption of flow of the extrusion on the top layer of this model, also seen on the guitar picks. This will most likely not be as critical of an error on this design or this model, but it's still a problem nevertheless. And if that wasn't bad enough, the actual finished model had an anomaly too. Not exactly the same kind that we've been having problems with in this video so far, but considering I'll probably have to defend myself from the people who don't care about fixing these kinds of things, and it was still partially caused because of the stupid bridging and all this advanced slicing, I thought it would be an interesting addition. In the full model, there was a line of bridging that just decided it wanted to break free, and it would have caused the nozzle to push through the already extruded wall and extrude a bit more through and outside of the model. My guess is that this was caused by a calculation error where the program was trying to be clever, following and supporting the infill. It was easily fixed by upping the infill from 10 to 11%, so it wasn't a huge end of the world deal, but all this advanced slicing is really just starting to boil my piss. I'm getting legitimately upset and angry about this because this issue just persists, and it seems that the more and more I think about it, the more it tries to make itself worse somehow and more prevalent, almost like it's taunting me. Anyway, I think I have addressed all the reasons why I'm kind of stumped in the area of fixing this issue, and I feel like there are no real fixes. If there are some settings somewhere or an alternate version of Orca Slicer that addresses this point, please let me know. But just don't be a prick about it either. I will be sending this video to Bambu Labs after uploading and reopening the support topic to see what they have to say. This is mainly a music and 3D printing channel talking about guitar and other music related gear, and talking about how to incorporate 3D printing into that, and how to solve everyday issues with it, along with other 3D printing issues as you have watched in this video. So, if you want to help me make a change and hopefully get some of these companies to actually look into some of these issues, leave a like, share this video, and subscribe for more helpful and informative content in the future. That's all I have to say for now, so I'm going to say bye-bye.